Well, this evening we want to continue in our study of anthropology, which, again, we mentioned this morning, is the study of man. We've spent the last 7 Lord's Day evenings gathered together looking at matters related to what is man. And we talked about matters relevant to how God made us, what we are made of, what we are made for, and then also some implications for doctrine and practice related to those realities. Shakespeare said, "What a piece of work is a man." Mankind is amazing in terms of the wisdom of God in fashioning us as a complex unity of body and soul. We are amazing creatures, are we not? Isn't it amazing just to think about what it means to be a person created in the image of God? With all of our complexities, with all of the nuance, we are amazing creatures in our bodies with how we can move. You think about all the athletic possibilities of a human body. And it is remarkable to think of how people desire to push the limits of our bodies and to see what are we actually capable of. And it's amazing what men have become capable of. We push those limits. But it's amazing to consider the complexity and the design of our eyes, to think about the way in which we hear, our skin, our skeletons, our organs, our capacity for speech and song. We are incredible creatures. But we are also persons made in God's image with immaterial souls that relate to God and to each other with reference to morals, to thinking and to reason, to creativity and craftsmanship, to affections and emotions and passions. We were made as image bearers of God with dignity and value that is to be respected and treated accordingly. Sin has not erased the image of God within us, but it has, of course, marred it. It has darkened it so as to not see ultimately the fullness of the original light of creation in us, as it has been darkened by the presence of sin, though the image of God is still present. And so one important area for us as Christians to study is who we are and who we were made to be. We, of course, are to study who God is. That will be our forever subject, right? That is our forever subject. Who is our God? And to understand Him more fully. But in the light of who God is, we then need to understand who He has made us to be. And where we've been so far is in this understanding of mankind as a whole. We've been studying what is a person, a man, a human being. Who are we as human beings and image bearers? But where we are going now then is to drill down deeper into who we are as men and women. How are we to express our humanity in the light of God's image and purpose for creating mankind as gendered persons? While having everything in common with reference to our humanity, our purpose and value, what was God's point in making us with different bodies and souls? What was God's point in doing that? We are, of course, the same kind, but we are different. We are not so different that we can't relate to each other, but we are obviously not identical in a variety of physical and soulish ways. The differences in our souls are also not differences of kind, but in distinctions of design and expression. Having eternal souls that are equal, male and female not being elevated in value or dignity or eternality over the other, but rather different only by design and expression. Men and women have different body type designs and different soul designs, so that we express ourselves differently from each other and are then equipped to fulfill the roles that God has designed us for in this world. And so being the same and yet different. Isn't that amazing that God would design us that way? To be the same, but different. We need to understand those differences that were made by God on purpose, and then we can better understand how we were made to live together, and even more than that, to become one flesh. And then how does one flesh raise different persons who live together in a way that they are well prepared to be joined to a different person and make more one flesh unions? And to bring even more people into their homes. So man, woman, marriage, and parenting. That's where we are headed. That's the design of this Sunday evening study. Well, let's first talk about the Scripture's noted distinctions between the sexes. Would you open your Bibles to Genesis chapter 1? Again, you've heard over and over again from a variety of sources other than even me, that so much of our understanding, so much of what we need to know about who we are and what God has designed for us is in the book of Genesis. And really, even in the first few chapters, there is so much richness in here. In Genesis chapter 1, verses 26 to 31, we have the account of the macro creation of man. The macro creation of man. God created mankind and gave to them the mission of taking dominion, of ruling the earth, of using it for food, for cultivating the ground and making something of it, and of fruitfully multiplying and filling, and that means spreading out throughout the whole world. And we looked at that. That is the macro level, the large, broad account of creation. It talks about God creating man, as in man and woman, and giving the command and the blessing of dominion and fruitfulness. In Genesis chapter 2, verse 7, we have the micro level account of God's creation of man. Okay, Genesis 1 gives the big overarching picture of what God did. Genesis chapter 2 actually drills down into the, if chapter 1 would be the telescope to look at the heavens and the stars, chapter 2 would be more the microscope to look down a little bit deeper into the details of the thing. And so, God created man. And man was created first. Genesis chapter 2, verse 7. Then the Lord God formed man of dust from the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living being. So in Genesis chapter 1, man and woman is spoken of as being created together on the sixth day. Chapter 2, verse 7, we have a little bit more of the moment of that creation, and it starts with creating the man of the first pair. It says he was made from the dust of the earth. God personally fashioned him as he wanted, and he breathed into man the breath of life so that he became a living soul. The union of what? Body and soul, material and immaterial, was created in man on the sixth day. And in verse 15, the man was put in the garden, and he was given the responsibility of cultivating and keeping it. Man was created and given a job. Immediately created and given a job. And in verse 16, God gave the man everything for his use and sustenance, being able to eat everything in the garden. And in verse 17, God gave man his law and forbid him from eating of one tree. And so man, the only man who we already understand is male, for God said in chapter 1 that he made man male and female, and we haven't got to the creation of the female version of man yet. Okay, we have man as the species, man as the crown of God's creation, as human beings, male and female. Right now we only have male. But if we stop here in Genesis 2:17, we find that God created the man and related to him as a sole representative of this kind of creation. God is dealing with man, the only man, individually and solely, as representative of this kind of creation. God created man and didn't wait for the woman. He actually related to Adam immediately and spoke to him and placed him in a spot and gave him a job and gave him his law by himself. Adam was created first, and the Apostle Paul points to that significance. Nothing is insignificant in the Scripture. The reality that Adam was created first, Paul picks up on in 1 Timothy 2:13, and he uses this understanding for why a woman is not allowed to teach or exercise authority over a man in the church. Why not? Because the man was created first. That's Paul's argument. He's looking to this area of Genesis chapter 2 and making a point of the order of creation matters for even life today in the church. It's like I said, so much of what we understand about how we are to understand ourselves and to live our lives is origined here in the book of beginnings, the book of Genesis. And we'll return to that subject later on, but we're continuing to make meaningful observations here. Adam being created first, he was given his mission alone to work, to exercise dominion, to eat, and to obey God. That happened when Adam was single and when he couldn't be otherwise. But then, continuing with the micro-level creation of mankind, Genesis chapter 2, verse 18. God declared something. And He declared that it was not good for man to be alone. And He says, I will make for him a helper suitable for him, or corresponding to him. Really, it speaks also of being of the same kind. The woman was made to fulfill a role, and that is to be a helper to the man who already had been given, who already had been set up for life on the earth. And interestingly, the woman wasn't made as a competitor for the same work or resources. But in verses 19 and 20, God brought to Adam all the animals who were made as male and female. Turns out the rest of the world, God in His wisdom had already designed it in the same similar way, wherein He made the same kind of animal, and yet He made them different, male and female. And in your observations of the natural world, when you look at the animal kingdom, what do you find? Differences between male and female animals. And God showed Adam that there was something that he was lacking. We talked about this yesterday at the men's breakfast and study. That God was very intentional. Isn't it amazing? Just again, the Bible study, so much of Bible study is observation, thinking about what's here. Sometimes it's even thinking about what's not here and recognizing that God did what He did on purpose in a particular way. You know what? He could have just created the woman and brought her to Him and be like, here you go. But why didn't He? Why didn't He do it that way? He actually did it in such a way as to point out to Adam, I'm missing something. Adam, man, is to understand and recognize his aloneness. He is to recognize that he is not complete. As he looked around at the animals, and we got two giraffes, male and female. We got that. We have two elephants, right? Two rhinoceroses, right? Keep going, Adam. Keep naming them, male and female, male and female. And Adam is brought to the understanding and recognition, I have a need. I don't have one made for me. And that is to be really an ongoing understanding for men. It is to see their need for companionship, their need to come under the design of God to be married, to have a corresponding spouse. And so God purposefully didn't just plop the woman down in front of him, but the reality was he wanted him to see his need. And so this man was made by God to sense his lack and his need for someone that corresponded to him. And we see, like the animals, again, we're able then to reproduce after their own kind. So that's a significant element. Adam sees that he's alone, and he has no other way to be otherwise. And we see this back about the animals reproducing after their kind, back in Genesis chapter 1. Turn the page over to Genesis 1, and we'll look at verses 24 and 25. Then God said, "Let the earth bring forth living creatures after their kind, cattle and creeping things, and beasts of the earth after their kind." And it was so. God made the beasts of the earth after their kind, and the cattle after their kind, and everything that creeps on the ground after its kind. And God saw that it was good. And so, contrary to evolution, right here in this passage, we see the reality that God made animals to reproduce after their kind. And they do so because they have corresponding male and female parts of their species. And I can't help a little bit of an aside here. I maybe could help it, but I don't want to help it. This is the most fundamental problem of homosexuality and transgenderism. I even heard someone say it out loud recently, and I liked it. But it isn't highlighted enough. Homosexual and transgendered people are infertile. It is unnatural because they are incapable of naturally reproducing after their kind. They cannot make and bear children because the person that they are with or the person that they are becoming is unable to bear children. The person that they're with doesn't correspond to them. That is fundamental to creation. It is suicide for a people to reject the purpose of our design for reproduction. And Adam was shown by God on purpose that the animals had a corresponding mate, males and females of each species that he would name. A man is to have a sense of his need to not be alone, but to have someone who is suitable for him, that they might come together and reproduce after their kind. That is the normal, ordinary pattern of creation right here at the beginning of the book. So once Adam is aware of his own lack and his own need, God goes to work to fill that void for him. Now this was, of course, God's intention all along. God is not caught by surprise. He didn't create Adam and went, "Man, what did I forget? What was it that I was going to do something, but where did I leave that other thing?" And so in chapter 2, verse 21, God is the first anesthetist, and he causes Adam to undergo surgery while being unconscious. And so Adam goes into a deep sleep, and God removes a rib. Adam does not participate in the creation of his wife. God does this apart from him. Now this is right away, it's interesting. Man was made from the dirt, but God did not go get some more dirt and make a wholly new creature. He took the man from the dirt. Women are from the dirt also, so we bury men and women in the ground alike. But women are made from the dirt because she is made from man. Shall we say, a dirty man. She is made in the image of God because she came from man who was made in the image of God. She is the same as him, but God fashions her apart from or distinct from man, like him but yet different. And in verse 22, the Lord God fashioned her with His intentional and creative design, a different person of the same kind. It says He fashioned the woman, but He gets to name the woman. Adam does. Now listen, this is very important. God creates the woman from the man, and look at the end of verse 22. It says, and brought her to the man. This is really the Father giving the one He created away. The Father is bringing this woman to this man to be joined to Him. This is why it's valuable for a father to give his daughter away. It actually means and represents something. So much today is very sentimental. Oftentimes it doesn't really mean anything, but this is God's normative order and design that the father gives his daughter away, brings her to the man. We have here a different pronoun for her. Her was brought to the man. Not him, her. God is the first identifier of proper pronouns. Okay? It's he and it's her. Also, God brought the woman to the man. That was God's birthday gift to Adam. Hey, I know that you needed this, so look what I got you. The man was created first, the woman was created second from the body of the man, and she was gifted to him in order to help him in a way that corresponds to him. Notice now in verse 23, Adam notes her equality with him. What does he say? Bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh. But then he does something important. He continues his work. What was Adam's job that he was given? It was to name the creatures. He continues his work that was given to him by God in the exercising of authority over creation, and Adam names her. She shall be called woman, not giraffe. She corresponds to him because it says she was taken out of man. In Hebrew, she will be called Isha, which means woman or wife, and in the Hebrew, the word Ish means man or husband. He is Ish. She is Isha. Those names of man and woman are distinct sexes of mankind. But later in chapter 3, verse 20, Adam gives his wife a personal name. Here he names her in terms of what kind of creation she is. She's corresponding but different. The same kind, but of the different sex. In chapter 3, verse 20, Adam gives his wife the name Eve because she is his wife and gives her this personal name as the mother of the living. Now, this is something very important. This naming of something indicates your rights over that thing and your authority over that thing. God named Adam. Adam named Eve. And we find in Scripture that parents name children. And there is something significant about that. Both fathers and mothers name children in the Bible. Fathers give names to their children. Mothers give names to their children. And that shows that children are to obey their parents. You know why? You know one of the reasons why children are supposed to name their parents is because they got their name from their parents. Their parents said, that's your name. Therefore, you get to be under those parents who named you. You have a responsibility. And so the ones who named you have authority over you. It isn't an accident in a patriarchal understanding that when a woman marries a man, he gives her a new name. Do you ever think about that and wonder about that? Why we just almost unthinkingly today, the woman takes the name of her husband. Unless you're operating in a feminist ideological framework. But previously, what does the woman have? She has her father's name. being under his authority. But now she changes her name and takes the name of her husband. Why? Because it identifies that she is under his authority. She is under his authority, and their children are under both of them. But when God names Adam, it identifies that Adam is under God's authority. Everything is under God's authority because, so if you look at it, right, since God is at the top, right, since God is at the pinnacle of authority, and man being under him, the woman being under man, and the children being under the husband and the wife, the father and the mother, and then all of creation under them. Everything is under God, but He has created things with order, hierarchy of authority. And again, we've already said, so you can't shoot me over it, that it's equality of person, equality of dignity, value, and worth of every human being. It is not a hierarchy of value, it is a hierarchy of responsible authority that God has designed. And so that's His order. And so they were not created at the same time. Adam was first. He gets to name his wife. So then men and women were created differently in terms of meaningful order, origin, and authority. Okay? Men and women are created different in terms of meaningful order, origin, and authority. God gave man his commission by himself, and then the man communicates this mission and God's law to his wife. Okay? Adam got the law, Adam got the mission before his wife was born, was made, right? And she is to then help the man and to follow him in fulfilling that calling. The woman was designed to be a wonderful complement to man. Now that's, of course, an idea that is very much under attack. It has been for a long time, isn't it? And there's lots of turmoil and trouble that comes when men and women abdicate their responsibility to live by God's design. We'll leave it at that for now. Now, of course, we won't get too far into the biological differences between men and women. These are evident both internally and externally, from hair, facial features, chest, hips, legs, bone and muscle structure, reproductive organs, hormones, and chromosome differences. And it is obvious to anyone without an agenda that we are different and yet the same kind that is made for each other. And notice, and by the way, can we all just be thankful for that? Amen, right? Amen. And notice that when it comes to gender confusion and appropriation, it isn't sufficient, listen, it isn't sufficient for a masculine man to say that he feels like or thinks of himself as a woman, is it? It's not sufficient for him to say that. To say, I think of myself and I feel like a woman, but he has to appropriate the different look of a woman in some way, doesn't he? Whether in bodily adjustments or in clothing. If you just say that you feel like or think of yourself as a woman being a man without appropriating feminine differences, what's the problem? Nobody will take you seriously. Even if you can't define what a woman is. And so listen, gender is tied to the differences with which God made men and women in both material and immaterial ways. And He only made two genders, male and female. And so that's why people who can't define what a man is or what a woman is, somehow they have to appropriate some difference, and they can't just say, I feel this way or think this way. They have to actually do something in order to make sense of how they feel or think. It's because those differences are hard-coded. And you can't escape it no matter how many cuts you make. Because you can't even get down to the chromosomal level where it all even shows itself. Well, let's look at one other passage of Scripture that highlights the differences between men and women. So we're starting with identifying the differences. 1 Peter chapter 3, if you would turn there. We're close this morning. 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 7. You husbands, in the same way, live with your wives in an understanding way, as with someone weaker, since she is a woman, and show her honor as a fellow heir of the grace of life, so that your prayers will not be hindered. So this passage here highlights the need for husbands to be students. Husbands, you need to be students of your wives because she's a woman. And it's so that you may live with them in an understanding way. You need to be a student so that you can understand. And in understanding, of course, the assumption is that with understanding, it corresponds then to types of behavior and communication. Knowing something, knowing who your wife is, leads you to a type of behavior. Why? Because understanding is not automatic because she is different from a man. Men understand men pretty well. But to understand a woman is something you have to be told to pursue so that you can successfully live together. Now, that is, of course, a two-way street, but the primary burden is upon the leader of the home to not treat her as one of the guys. So important. She's not one of the fellas. You have to think differently in terms of studying and understanding who your partner is in a spouse. She is not one of the guys. And by that, it has a very, shall we say, civilizing effect. That is the key of civilization. It is men bridling their manness, bringing it under control to an understanding way with a woman. What does Peter say? She is a weaker vessel. Now, in what way is a woman weaker than her husband? Well, she is weaker in terms of her physical difference. And so a husband needs to understand that. That doesn't mean that she has no strength. Man, we are grateful for that. And we actually, listen, we need strong women. Even physically. But we also recognize that the pickle jar is often a kryptonite for many a woman. Because they are different. Right? Speaking normatively, of course. I remember a little video of this guy at a baseball game. And I don't know what he was trying to open. But he a muscle-bound guy, and the camera kept coming back to him because he's trying so hard to open this thing, and he couldn't open it. Anyway, that's just a little aside. But it's speaking normatively. Normatively, men are stronger physically than their weaker wives. Look, and that's not debatable. And if you think it's debatable, look at the sports situation, and you get a pretty good idea. But again, this is not a downplay or a downgrade. It doesn't mean that a woman has no strength to do the things that she is best suited for in her supportive role. And a strong woman is a great and a needed thing. And I think of several strong woman examples in the Scripture. We think of those women who are gleaning in the fields. I think of Jael. You guys know who Jael is? Remember the story of the tent peg through the temple? Right? She grabs a big tent peg and a hammer, and this guy is sawing logs, and she comes, and she jams that tent peg right through his head into the ground. She had some strength behind that hit. Right? But Proverbs 31 also describes a woman who is capable of a lot of long hours and hard work, late nights. But somehow women aren't found typically in hard labor jobs. I actually really like the way that Jordan Peterson talked about the difference of the inequality of men and women in certain job or leadership functions. And he pointed out that, well, if you want equality, how about we get more women in the bricklaying industry? Right? You remember, perhaps some of you have seen that idea, that there's actually a reason why men do so much of the heavy jobs, the hard labor jobs. It's because they're best suited for it. And because in many ways they have a propensity for doing those things. But somehow, again, women aren't found typically in those hard labor jobs or military force or police environments, especially without the equalizing tools like guns. Right? If you don't have guns, you don't have women in the military or in the police force. That's just a basic thing. But in terms of physical protection, heavy labor, competition, the woman is undeniably weaker. And a man needs to appreciate and to understand and to have proper even expectations, proper care and protections for that sake, so that they live together well. Well, how else are women weaker? Women are weaker in their immaterial persons in terms of their emotional and intellectual leadership capabilities. Paul points to this specifically in 1 Timothy 2:14, and he says, "And it was not Adam who was deceived, but the woman, being deceived, fell into transgression." Now, this is in the context also of why women are not allowed to lead in the church. It is not simply arbitrary, as some complementarians would like to propose, that there's entirely equal elements of man and woman. God just decided, we'll just divide it here and we'll just split it in that regard, all things being equal. It's not just arbitrary. Rather, Paul points to a corollary reason for the subjugation of women in the life of the church, and it was that woman was deceived. Men were made by design to lead in areas of discernment as part of his role. Adam wasn't deceived. His sin was worse. His sin was worse because his being undeceived was sheer rebellion. But Paul points to the reality that one of the reasons why a woman is not to teach in the church is because Eve was deceived. And we'll get into the differences of roles and biblical manhood soon, but men were made to be producers in the area of thoughtful discernment and orthodox preservation. Again, primarily, women are more prone to being deceived and are to seek counsel from their husbands who lead them in discerning answers. That doesn't mean that men are never deceived. Okay, that's clear from Scripture, it's clear from experience. But that women are more prone to being deceived, and Paul points this out elsewhere also in 2 Timothy 3:6. And part of the concern about sinful teachers, false teachers, Paul says, is that those false teachers enter households and captivate weak women. And those women actually need to be stronger. It's not saying women should be weaker. They do need to be stronger, but they are more prone to being weak in the deception department. But most of the truth of this is evidenced by the volume of such production and leadership by men. And it would seem that generally speaking, men are better at it than women, but men have dominated the world with writings. Men have done the predominant work in the field of of production and inventions and ideas because they are normatively better suited to such things in their makeup and in their role. God designed them to be good at that. And men are more driven. This is a key element. Men are more driven to rise up, to tackle intellectual debates, and to pursue answers. Part of masculine energy, part of masculine propensity for fighting is also shows up in the area of debate, of arguing without killing each other, because you're working through issues and pursuing answers. And it kind of goes along with the desire that men have to fix things. There's not a lot of debate that's the propensity for men, is it? Men love to normatively fix things, whether it's literal physical fixing of things, or whether it's fixing the issue in the relationship, or in the conversation, or in the problem. Men desire often to fix. And that's part of pursuing answers and solving problems. Also, men are more driven to overcome obstacles or opposition than women are, and are better at it in general. Men have a particular drive to overcome and to conquer, to get around or over obstacles that are in front of them. Now, there is thankfully so much overlap between the sexes also, because our commonality is being made in the image of God. It's not that women have none of those qualities. But hear me out before you prepare the gallows. I'm not saying that women are non-intellectual, have no capacity for discernment, or should not read or write or study, etc., etc. That is not what I'm saying. Just like I'm not saying that a man should never change a diaper, help with the house, cuddle a little child, all things he is not made primarily for. But to deny that there is any distinction, or to deny that there is any difference between men and women, normatively, by design, in terms of psychological and emotional design, is to have blinders on to history and to society. And it's a good thing. Our differences are meant to truly complement one another, to correspond and to make a better world, because man by himself, oh boy, right? Man by himself makes a lot of trouble. But someone who corresponds, someone who is different, someone who, when a man understands and brings himself under the control of understanding how to live with someone who is different, makes things so much better. So, when it comes to things like the gender gap in business, or the so-called wage gap between men and women, what many people conveniently leave out of their outrage is the fact that more men have ambition for achieving, for ambition for leadership. More men have ambition for success, ambition for competition than women do. And the reason there are more male CEOs than women CEOs is because more men want it. And more men are prepared to chase it and to sacrifice for it and to equip themselves for it than women are. And what is being pushed now is an artificial and arbitrary push for equity. We're seeing more men in leadership CEO positions than women. Something is wrong. Change it. Demand it. Require it. Make a rule. Make a law. Rather than dealing with what is best for the company and who is best qualified for it, and how has God purposed and designed and ordered the world, especially from the standpoint of households. And so what's happening today is just, you really don't hear the word any longer. It's just DIE, diversity, inclusion, and equity. They say DEI because they didn't want to put it as die, because that's what it really is. But it's really just affirmative action, the old affirmative action based on gender rather than race in that situation. But when it comes to the differences between men and women, a woman's strong intellectual and emotional abilities are to be primarily channeled into supporting their husbands. A woman's mind and her strength, her emotional abilities, all of the ways that make her special and unique, and we'll get to the women eventually as well. But right now we're highlighting the differences, and part of the difference is to channel her energy, not in making a name independently for herself and achieving something great for her, but rather channeling that into support of her husband, building their household together, raising their children, and in discipling other women. Men and women are designed differently, primarily in role, with distinctions, with differences in immaterial and material factors. But again, with many elements in common, because we are of the same kind. And when it comes to our material bodies and our immaterial souls, God designed us very well to complement each other. A woman's strength in how she is made also reflects God's personhood, and God is described in Scripture with some qualities that are more associated with feminine virtue. But in chapter 3, verse 7 of 1 Peter, Peter calls the woman weaker, but not because she is inferior in her humanity. But rather, the husband is to understand that she is weaker in a way that makes her extremely precious and valuable as someone to be protected and valued. So often the common example is of a Ming vase, right? It is weaker in terms of there's an element to it, though, that makes it so precious that you want to make sure that you care for it. Understand how it is to be treated. And it's not to be a football that you throw across the room, right? It is something that is to be understood as valuable and precious. And so therefore, she is to be shown honor as an equal person who is also an heir of the grace of life, he says. She's an heir of the grace of life. She is a sister in Christ. Her weakness is not inferiority, but a valuable treasure to be protected with the very lives of men, to be protected with your life. And that's what men are made for. It's part of the role. We'll get to that. We'll break that down more as we go. But Peter points out that God also, notice in chapter 3, verse 7, that God is watching you, men. You notice that? That you better be a good student, and you better get some understanding, because what does it have an effect on? God takes notice of how you treat your women, which has a direct impact on His willingness to answer your prayers. Because, see, God has entrusted a wife to you. She's not your possession. She is made by God, given to you by God, that He is part of that covenant that you've made with your spouse. What God has joined together. Every marriage is something that God has joined together. This woman is given to you to play a particular role for you as a husband, how you treat her, because she has responsibility to you. She has a role to play. She has a submission to give. She has a support to provide. But the way you treat her and the way you live with her in an understanding way is so important. And God is taking notes, and when you pray to Him, He's considering how you treat your wife as to whether or not you get a positive answer. Do I misspeak? Lest your prayers be hindered. And so if you want to be a successful man, if you want to build something, if you want to have a flourishing household, open the books, get to understanding, lead well, protect, treasure, value, honor as one who is a fellow heir of the grace of life, and know that God is watching, and it makes a difference for how you relate to Him by how you relate to her. And your prayers will be affected one way or another by whether or not you are obedient to Him and honoring to Him in this area. Okay, so there's a lot there. Suffice it to say that men and women are the same in humanity, equal in personhood, joint heirs of God's grace of life, made for each other, having been designed for primary purposes with strengths and weaknesses. Meant for maximum benefit to each other as they live with each other. Okay, so for the ladies' sermon discussion sake, I will say that again because I read that pretty fast. Men and women are the same in humanity, equal in personhood, joint heirs of God's grace of life, made for each other, having been designed for primary purposes, with strengths and weaknesses, meant for maximum benefit to each other as they live with each other. So what then does it mean to be a man who follows God's design for the way he was created distinctly as a man? We are studying, of course, some of that in-depth elements in our men's Saturday morning study, but I want to point to how God made man, as described in the Bible, to play his role in God's created order. So we'll just talk about roles next. We'll talk about a little more about how God made men for his role. Again, God did not create us the same but different, and our biological and psychological makeup points to what we are made for. Now, there's a number of ways to do this, to go about this. My favorite, I think, is what Voddie Baucham describes in terms of being a qualified man to marry one of his daughters. In other words, as a Christian dad, what does a godly man look like according to the Bible that I would be willing to hand over the reins of authority and leadership to another man, to take my place as a father? What does it mean to be, what is he looking for? A godly man. And someone with a trajectory of godliness. Because again, none of us have arrived. We all have to be careful of that too, that we don't have higher expectations than we ought to, but there is a sense of normative godliness in a man that we want to look for. And so he enumerated the categories in a way that I thought was helpful. So know that I am footnoting here Voddie Baucham for this particular categorization. And so the roles for biblical manhood are, some of you already know this, prophet, priest, provider, and protector. That's the shorthand for what it means to be a godly man. Biblical manhood is in large part pointed in those four areas: prophet, priest, provider, and protector. Now we look at these roles after we understand that God made us to take dominion, to be creative rulers over the earth, to live under authority first as individuals under the authority of God. But then in terms of household authority, government authority, and religious authority. Okay, hierarchy is not just in the home, it also shows up in other elements of society and organization of people. We'll touch on authority more as we go because, of course, authority is crucial to understanding marriage and parenting, but also as individuals living in the world, as men and women living in authority, how do we understand those? And those are embedded in these four categories. But let's start with a man's role as prophet. Will be abbreviated. We will not blow this out tonight because my internal clock says I've been going for a while. So we'll try to keep this brief. Men are to function as prophets with a little p. Okay? Men are to be little p prophets. And some men have been called by God to be, of course, throughout history, big P prophets is what I'm referring to it. Now, a prophet in its most basic sense is someone who speaks for God or who represents God to the people. What's a prophet? A prophet speaks for God to someone else, representing God. And I already alluded to Adam's prophetic role in Genesis 2, right? God had spoken to Adam while he was single. And once the woman came along, he was then to communicate to her, especially God's law. I believe that Eve learned of the forbidden fruit from Adam. Adam had already been told. And in chapter 2, verse 16, God commanded Adam about the tree in the middle of the garden. That was before the woman was made, and so he was clearly responsible for communicating to her what God had commanded him. Biblical manhood starts with being a man like David and Christ, being after God's own heart. That you care about what God cares about. That you care about what God has said. And that means that you love the Lord and that you want to be close to God. That you want to be obedient yourself. That you have a direct relationship to God. You desire closeness. You desire to know Him, to love Him, to serve Him, and you care about what He has revealed, what He has communicated and said. And so you want to hear His word so that you can do it yourself and then teach others. Adam was to represent God to Eve. He was to teach her and to model for her the character of God in his own life. And being a saved man with a heart for God is seeking to restore what was lost in the fall by way of his abdication. Because Adam should have said something at the temptation. He should have said, "No, honey, that's not what we do. That's not what we do. God told us not to do that." So this role of prophet is truly one of recognizing as a man that you are under authority. You as a man are under God and are to learn of Him so that you are able to teach others also. Listen, fathers with daughters, beware of giving your precious daughter to a man who doesn't care deeply for knowing and loving God Himself personally in his walk. Beware of giving your daughter to someone who is so immature that he is unable to lead her in the truth of God's Word. Doesn't mean that he has to be the most skilled teacher to ever walk the face of the earth. I love the way Voddie even talks about that. Some guys want their prospective daughters' husbands to be godlier than David, stronger than Samson, right? And could really overdo it. But you need to be able to see, what does he care about? How does he live? What's his trajectory? And be able to discern these things. And so young men, you need to be a godly man with this type of trajectory. You don't have to arrive at perfection, but this is the direction you need to be, because you are to be a prophet little p. You are to represent God to your spouse. And so being a prophet is first about being a godly man who is well qualified to represent Him, but second, being a prophet is one who is able to lead by teaching God's Word. A godly man pursues the knowledge of the Word of God so that he can lead his wife and his children to love and obey. And this is something that, of course, that a man grows into. Because if you ask any man in this room, you'll identify men who have a lot to continue to work on. And we don't arrive at it until we find ourselves like Christ. So it is an ongoing work and effort to improve. But this is what we want for all of our boys to become. And so listen, you are not necessarily a godly man just because you are a Christian. Not every person who says, yes, I have come to know Christ is qualified to be considered a godly man. A godly man is one who has spent time with the Lord. Look, a person who is just saved is a baby spiritually. But there's supposed to be a maturation process, a growing up into the Lord. One who searches out His Word, and he is competent in discernment and in leading a family. Now, every man, of course, needs to grow in this area, but let's not pretend that all men are equal if they are in Christ. Godly men who know Christ are to be able to be prophets to their wives and children, reading with them, studying God's Word, teaching it, and demonstrating discernment in His leadership. And how many of you don't want this for your sons and grandsons? We all want this. And so this is the direction of a godly man who pursues the role of prophet with a little p. And what we need to regain is a vision for this to be normative for men. This should be, sometimes my old business world creeps in. This is what in the business world you'd call table stakes. This is what's table. That's ordinary. That's just what should be average expectant to come. We should want this type of godly prophets running around our church and going out from our church. This should be normative in our hopes and expectations and efforts, and not something for super Christians like missionaries or pastors. I'll just point real quickly to that podcast we had. Wonderful discussion. I know I'm probably ruining it for you. Spoiler alert. In talking with Derry Doom. And this issue of if someone actually takes God's Word seriously and has a passion for the Scripture, who just wants to know God, it doesn't make him a super Christian that has to go to seminary. And in part, that's sort of the way it was with Derry. He just wanted to know God more, and so someone said, well, maybe you should study the languages of Greek and Hebrew. Oh, okay, fine. If that's what it means, I'll be glad to put forth that effort. And so he studies in undergraduate college work Greek and Hebrew. And then basically the next question is, well, when are you going to seminary? Is he called to the ministry? And the answer was no. He's just a great member of the body of Christ who loves God and who loves His Word and yet can serve Him normatively in the body. That's actually the type of person who loves God's Word and wants to represent Him well. That's what we want for everybody. That doesn't make you called to the ministry. So don't be worried about that. Oh man, if I take this too seriously, someone's going to think that I'm supposed to be in ministry. Maybe, maybe not. That's for God to really work on your heart in. You need to be pursuing normatively a heavy understanding and clarity of God's person and through His Word. So listen to that podcast when it comes out. All right, we need to call it here for today. We'll pick up next time as we unpack a little bit more scripturally of these roles of men, prophet, priest, provider, and protector as we seek to understand and describe biblical masculinity. Let's pray. Lord, we thank You for this time. We thank You for Your Word, and we ask that You would work in each of us a sense of who You have made us to be, male and female, that we might live for You in a way that You have designed us to, that complements Your design for the world, for humanity. We thank You for the differences that You have made. We pray that we would not blur them or diminish them or degrade them or create artificial things that reduce the equality that You have made us with. Equally valuable and made in God's image, yet designed distinctly for Your glory, that we might live well together. We pray for the husbands who are here especially, that they would study well and live with their wives in an understanding way, that they would also be those who pursue godliness in their character, that they might be those who have a deep devotion to godliness and learning of You, of studying, of knowing your word and then being able then to pass it on, to give it away, especially first in their own households, to their spouse and to their children. We pray that this would grow in our hearts for a strong desire and that it would show up in practice. We pray that we would be prayerful for each other, that we would help each other, encourage each other, admonish, correct one another, and we pray that you would continue to work in us as we study these things. We pray it all in Jesus' name. Amen.